I lost along the way, 'cause every time I look at you.
And welcome back to the Midday Show. I am Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. We're going to talk about local superintendent resigning, and then you and I have like a unique conversation talking about like high school graduation.
All we have is unique conversations.
Just thinking out loud. We're also going to talk about a Penn Live report. They talked about inflation and what's coming next. We're also going to talk about the Liberty University scandal. It just came out this morning. If you haven't heard about it yet,
Bad.
It is not great. And then we're going to end with some football. Obviously, the Penn State. You could call it a game. You could call it a debacle. I did catch some of the Pitt-Clemson game as well. Before we dive into all of that, Mark, how are you feeling today?
Well, today's a little different because usually I show up here on Monday, and it means the Cowboys just won because it's the day after football day, but they didn't win yesterday because they were off.
Yes.
So it's a little bit, but Pitt, I've become a Pitt fan because my daughter goes there.
Congratulations.
Let's the long history that goes along with it.
Great year to go on the bandwagon.
I mean, I'm not pretending that I am a dyed-in-the-wool, but I joked last week that if you would have bet preseason that when Pitt played Clemson, Pitt was higher ranked, you would have made a lot of money. If you would have bet like 2 weeks ago that today, on what is today, the 25th, that Pitt would be higher than Penn State in the AP poll, you would have made a lot of money.
No,
now,
you'd be rich right now.
All Penn State fans now still like the coaches poll because they're higher in that one than Pitt for some reason. But in the AP poll, Pitt is now the number one team in the state of Pennsylvania, and we'll get to Penn State a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to talk about football here near the end. A report that we have on NorthcentralPa.com, our own Emma Downey did it for us. Bloomsburg School District Superintendent resigns, and the district also addressed a graduation rate inaccuracy. First, we'll touch on the actual report of the superintendent resigning. Superintendent Dr. Donald Wheeler, he resigned. He announced his resignation during the school board meeting Monday night. We just put this out as well. His resignation actually goes into effect on November 1st. According to an eyewitness news report, there was this idea of toxic leadership. Different school district employees had come out and said that a lot of people were kind of at their tipping point, at their boiling point. They were kind of over it. It is reported. The only real factual thing that I can say is that there has been a departure of 10 plus teachers from the district since July. One of those employees came out saying that part of it was that toxic leadership as to why they left. I did not know the numbers until actually reading it. I did not realize that they had almost a dozen teachers leave the school district.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Because Bloomsburg ain't a huge, you think of like Bloomsburg because of the university. Bloomsburg is one of those towns because of like Mansfield and Lock Haven and Bloomsburg. The town is not. The town is much of the school, Now I know there's Central Columbia, so there's other schools down there but Bloom High School is like double A.
I believe since they went to the 6A classifications, I know in basketball right now they're 3A. They were 2A initially. Okay. And then they just recently, but a lot of times, even though you move classifications, it's not because you got bigger, it's because other schools got smaller.
So graduation, they're not graduating 100 kids, are they?
I would suspect they're still below the 100 plateau. Okay. I would suspect that they're still graduating double.
So for a school district that size with less than 100 kids per class to lose 10 teachers since June?
Since July is what's being reported.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So obviously it was toxic probably sounds like an accurate description. But anyway, that's not the point. Well, obviously Bloomsburg School District is in upheaval.
Yes.
But reading through, there was a statement that kind of jumped out at both of us. I thought I was a bad person because this jumped out at me, but it jumped out at you too. So maybe we're both bad.
Maybe we are. It jumped out at both of us. And it wasn't so much it's not actually the actual quote itself, but it's the idea or the concept behind it. There was a quote made that the board's goal can be no less than a 100% graduation rate.
That was said by somebody on the board, not the superintendent.
Somebody on the board. But it's really not so much who said it or why they said everything else. What you and I ended up diving into this conversation of, obviously it's a goal. Obviously, shoot for the stars, reach for the moon, all the other cliches when you're talking about goals or aiming for things. But you and I kind of looked at each other and said, I don't know if a 100% graduation rate is a real goal, if that's something you actually should be aspiring to.
I think when you show up, obviously you want to give each kid the opportunity and to give reasonable help and guidance, because we understand everyone's home life and everyone's personal situation is not the same. And you want to help the kids that want to help themselves, that are trying, that want to graduate. There are kids who don't care. There are kids that don't show up. There are kids that don't do the work. And I think if in a public school system, if you have 100% graduation rate, then your graduation is too simple, because there are kids that just don't come. It's like a sports team. It's like a job. Do you give everybody a raise? No, you don't give everybody a raise, because if you give everybody a raise, then it's not incentive to the people who are really doing their job exceptionally. Sure. Because there are always people in every business who aren't doing their job exceptionally, except here at NorthcentralPa.com. So
we should say, by the way, the school district itself, the actual quote, they said some things that obviously we agree with. We want our teachers, support staff, and building level principals to feel valued and empowered. 100% agreed. We want success and connection not to be empty words or promises. Completely agree. There were things said at this that are, no-brainers.
They sound pretty empty, don't they?
No, but I'm just saying, no-brainers, you obviously agree with them. So it's not so much that we are disagreeing with the statement made by Bloomsburg. It just brought up the conversation of what is what's a realistic graduation rate look like in 2021? And B, is 100%, I don't know if having a 100% graduation rate is necessarily good for your school. It's a hard thing to balance, because the key word that you said to me that stood out was opportunity. Every kid should have the opportunity to attain a high school diploma. I think most people, almost everybody, would agree with that statement. But that doesn't mean that everybody can, or that everybody accomplishes it. But somehow we've kind of moved away from this idea that like a 100% graduation rate means success.
And I think that we should, teachers should encourage, because because of socioeconomic backgrounds and some challenges at home, there's some kids who graduate high school is much, much harder than for a lot of other kids. Sure. And so I think the encouragement, I think being aware of what kids, not letting kids fall through the cracks, who should make it, if they were in a different environment, they would make it easily. And I get all of those things. But there are kids, because teenagers are naturally rebellious, and because adults tell them one thing, that there are some teenagers who are just going to do the opposite. And I think there very clearly at every public school, there are kids who shouldn't graduate, who don't deserve to graduate, just because they don't come, they don't do anything, and when they are there, they don't care.
And to play even more devil's advocate, I would like to personally say that doesn't mean they're necessarily a failure either.
Oh,
I know lots of people who have been very successful, either without a high school diploma or without really ever using their.
Do you want to hear the list?
Diploma.
Should we make a list of the college dropouts who just killed it?
Oh, crushing it. Well, that's on another, right? You're talking about like the tech world and so.
But still,
even locally, like I have friends who are welders. I had an acquaintance in high school. This is a true story. They got into cleaning hooves for hooves.
Okay.
For horses and cows and farm animals and different stuff. Crushed it. 6 digits a year, absolutely killing it financially. And like they could have done without school. Now obviously there's a social aspect to it, and I'm not saying school wasn't beneficial for them, but I'm just saying this idea of like the weight of a high school degree, and that there should be a 100% graduation rate. But I would go even a step further and say, like, I don't even know if a high school graduation rate being 100%, there's people that like, they don't need it. And to be honest with you, they're better off without.
Well, I never thought of this until I got into real estate, but one of the theories, and these are all just theories, obviously, but one of the theories was when you have commercial rental spaces, or you have like an apartment complex, that the layperson would think, what's best? 100% occupancy. And there are people that will tell you in the business that if you have 100% occupancy, you're doing it wrong, because then your prices are probably too low. And how do you raise price? It's harder to raise prices when it's full than when it's empty. And it's harder to do maintenance when it's full. If you've got an empty one, you can maintain that one, and then you can move, and then the next tenant can go there, and then the next one can go there. But and I'm sure there are people that are landlords that are like, nope, I disagree. I think 100% occupancy is better, but there is that theory. So I'm sure there are people out there who are like, well, of course we want all the kids to graduate. Well, of course we want all the kids to graduate. But that's like saying every kid that comes out for the team should make it. And you are probably hurting your team if every kid that comes out for the team makes it.
That's possible. So good luck to Bloomsburg. They do have, the district is going to have an interim superintendent who is already in the building as an administrator.
And what greater job would it be right now during the COVID world than being a superintendent?
Brutal.
Oh, so, you know what would be worse is principal. I think the principals take the brunt because they're there.
Well, and also most people know the face of their kid's principal. Not everybody knows the face of their.
The principal goes through the grocery store and everyone knows who it is. The superintendent can go anonymous. Yeah, it's a good point. That's a very good point.
So I don't disagree with you on that. Penn Live recently released a report. The title of it, Think Everything is Expensive Now, Get Ready for What's Next. You and I actually just talked about this based around restaurants. This goes and kind of broadens it out. Some of the companies that are listed here, Unilever, WD-40 Company, Dove Soap, Magnum Ice Cream, Gamble Company, these are just to name a few of them, have all said that in the last quarter, their prices have gone up 4 to 6%. And it says, a quote from Unilever CEO Alan Jope on Bloomberg was, "We're in for at least another 12 months of inflationary pressures. We are in a once in 2 decades inflationary environment. We are far from done here."
I wonder, I was thinking about the shipping because I know the whole chain as this goes, where there's 7,000 boats sitting off the Los Angeles port. How do they ever unblock that?
How do they ever get it straightened out or fixed it? I don't know. I mean, a lot of times I'll play a devil's advocate, or I have a thought about it or anything else. I don't know what the answer is to solving the logistical problems. I mean, we came on here and I kind of scoffed at the idea. I don't know if you saw a week ago or not. Biden's administration came out and said they were going to have truck drivers drive at night to try to relieve some of the issue. And listen, I appreciate the effort. I kind of scoffed at the idea. I don't know if that's going to solve it. So the point I'm making is, I don't know. And I don't even know if people like
the geniuses know.
I don't even know if people above me or above that really know. It was kind of like we had the John Deere story a little bit ago. And we talked about like when you're on a plant factory floor and you just don't realize like the timing of everything and how everything flows together. And so you expand that out of a factory, and now you're talking about like the global economy and just how do you ever get that back on the straight and narrow and fix it? I think it's one of those things where you almost have to wait for it to untangle itself. But do you feel that way?
I think the only way to do it is to have less ships show up in the port, because there's always going to be a logjam. Because the whole chain of it, you think like, well, what we need to do is send a whole bunch of workers there, like, the National Guard, to show up to help speed up the unloading of these ships. But then they can't store everything. So now you need an extra allotment of trucks to get them out. And then you need truck drivers to get them out. And then when they get to the stores, they have an inventory that they're used to, and they can't stock all this stuff.
That's why I think the only answer is time. I think it's going to take time to get all of this. It's like when there's a pile up on the highway, right? And the traffic's at a gridlock and it's stopped and backed up. Like the solution for that is time. Like you have to wait for the car in front of you to move, and car has to wait.
But once they clear the highway,
Yeah,
you're off and in
no,
10 minutes.
But you're
it's
not
gone.
But it's most of the time it's not though. It's gone where you can see. Like at the front of the line, it's clear. But if you're like time is the answer to this. And I think again, as Americans are going to struggle with that answer. Like that is not the answer most Americans
I get the
want
point,
to hear.
but once the highway is clear, it's clear, and the people can just
But this
go.
isn't the highway.
This is never going to be clear.
But this isn't the highway. This is the global economy.
Correct.
So what I'm saying to you is you say like, well, in 10 minutes, it's clear. And what I'm saying to you is 10 minutes in the supply chain of the global economy, maybe it's not 10 minutes. Maybe to clear the highway and get it going again, 10 minutes might equate to a year. You know, do you understand what I'm saying?
But so to take the analogy further, I'm almost like, did we lose a lane? Because wherever you're at when it's busy, when you go from 3 lanes to 2 lanes, there's a bottleneck. And are we always going to have that bottleneck? Can we ever get rid of it?
I don't think you lost a lane. What I think you found is that the people that were in the gridlock, they're late. Like they weren't on their way to vacation. They were on their way to work. And now everyone's trying to get in at the same time. That's how I don't have an answer. You don't think that's possible?
I mean, I guess, but
everybody needs something right now. Like you didn't lose the capacity of your loading docks or the capacity of the travel. What you lost was that idea of like, well, normally we only need this every 2 weeks. And what's happened is because we don't have any of it now, it's like every day people are trying to find what they need. So to me, it's just the rush afterwards. Nobody's just going past the accident point and just being like, oh, we're finally going to get to the beach. Everyone's like, we have to get where we're going. And I think it's backed up. I think it's going to take time, and people do not want to hear that. But I don't have.
Well, it ain't happening tomorrow. Just a year from now, is it any better? That's the question.
That is the question. Let's do this. The Liberty Way. We had just found out about
this. This is a bad story. This is a really bad.
This is pretty rough. So you can find the full report on ProPublica. Like I said, it came out this morning. It's about Liberty University. I didn't realize it was this large. It has about 15,000 students, which you were right on the money. I asked you, I said, how many students do you think go to Liberty? And you nailed it. Kudos to you. Blue Ridge Mountains in Lynchburg, Virginia. Liberty has faced sex and financial scandals in recent years involving former university president Jerry Falwell, who you said, when I said the name,
it's Junior now. I think Jerry Falwell, the televangelist, founded it.
Okay.
I think his kid now, because there's a Liberty University scandal regularly.
Okay.
There was something about now I'm trying to remember out loud. It was some sexual thing about, because as we get into the story, you'll find out that like there is no fraternization with the opposite sex, and that's one of the reasons these people are in trouble. But there was something, so we can Google it. Him and his wife and extramarital or something, and what made it such a glitzy story, if you will, was because the way the university talks and the stringent, Christian right regulations of the university, that they hold their students to this, but then the founder's son and the president and all this stuff, the president of the university are doing all this crazy stuff. So there is a Liberty scandal all the time. This is the latest.
Okay. So real quick before we go, part of what made this a scandal, there is something known as the Liberty Way. So essentially that is their student honor code. The goal is to encourage and instruct our students how to love God through a life of service to others. The way we treat each other in our community is a direct reflection of our love of God. Central to the Liberty Way is a focus on abstinence prior to marriage, what's known in evangelical communities as purity culture. As the Liberty Way puts it, sexual relations outside of a biblical ordained marriage between a naturally born man and naturally born woman are not permissible at Liberty University. The code also includes things about partying, drinking with the opposite sex, all different things worked into that Liberty Way code. And the reason it's important to know or understand how the code works is essentially what would happen is that when female students would report cases of rape, the university would come back and would basically threaten them with the Liberty Way honor code and essentially say that if you in any way have broken this code, you went to a party to fraternize, you were drinking on campus, you had premarital sex with somebody else. There's this whole way that they then use the code back onto the victim, because I have to victim because it's alleged.
It's alleged.
None of them have actually gone to court yet, which is the craziest part of this story. So they use the Liberty Code to basically fall back onto the victim and be like, are you sure you want to do this? Because if not, you could lose your scholarship. You could lose your ability to attend Liberty University. And it is just now coming out, kind of this process and how they've used this code that was deemed, again, it's called an honor code.
It's the honor code.
It's considered of high esteem, and they've used this code to stop people from reporting rape.
And listen, at you and I know, we discussed this off the air before we went on. One of the sexual assaults occur at colleges and universities. The universities are not excited to publicize this because it makes them look bad and it scares away future applicants. Mm-hmm. So they do not want to go public with this as much as possible. However, what makes Liberty's unique is, as you said, girl comes forward and says, I was raped. They then say to her, were you drinking? She says, yes. They say, well, you violated the code. Are you sure you want to report this? Because you could get in trouble.
Right.
So then it is their way of hush-hushing, and it's in their Christian values of let's protect the rapist. And that's what's been going on. And I would guess, will be very spotlight-ish as to, now that this story has broken, there will be mountains of former people who've come back who either said, it happened to me, I know someone, it happened to my friend, it happened to my roommate, and this is going to be very, very bad for Liberty University. But somehow, well, we'll see if the university itself will survive, but heads will roll, and we will see which ones it is. But this is not just getting brushed away, not in the Me Too era.
No, and what makes it unique as well, and what you were getting at there, what's unique about it is the majority of organizations, universities pick the company you want to use. Most of them at some point have tried to sweep something under the rug. Unfortunately, that is the world that we live in. The difference here is how they swept it under the rug by pointing the finger back at the victims and trying to convince them that, like, this is not the route you want to go. That in itself, there's a level of cruelty. There's just a completely, we talked about it with the Cosby
A level
case.
Of cruelty is very well said.
Yes. We talked about the Cosby case where, like, you don't want to compare rapists, but I talked to you about how with Cosby, he knew a lot of the victims and they trusted him. And there was this, it wasn't like he was doing it to strangers. And it's the same thing here where you don't want to compare mishandling of rape allegations, but there is a cruelty to this one that kind of jumps it over top.
And the reason that this got started is that a guy within, and you can read it and we'll, whatever, a guy within the university was like, is there any way, like, we need to do something about this?
Right.
Because this looks bad. How do we get to the bottom of this? He was sending internal, like, we need to do something about it, and he was fired. So he's suing the school, and he's blowing whistles, and that's why this has become the story it's become, and it's not going to be good.
No, it isn't. I do want to find the quote that he gave, because the quote is very not damning.
I was going to say damning.
Yeah, it just gives you an idea of how even it kind of dawned on him, like, oh my God, like, we're mishandling this. Because essentially what he said is
he said, isn't there a way we should figure out how to get to the bottom of this? And then I realized no one was trying to get to the bottom.
He reached out to the administration, and he essentially said, like, can we make a comment? Can we make a statement? Can we say we're working on this? Can we say we empathize with the victims? Anything. And it was just silence. And then he said it like a ton of bricks. It hit him sitting at his desk, like, oh my God, like, nobody's actually trying to fix this.
Nobody cares.
And then he was out the door about a month or two later. So it is an interesting story. You can go to ProPublica to see. I was reading it to you. We read the majority of the report, And like I said, it's a very, very, it's worse than what you even think it is.
It is as bad, to summarize it, as you said, as you put it well.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have this and have the university try to hush it and have it not come out because it looks bad, because they need enrollment. They need, it looks bad against the university. It is another to turn around and look at the victim and say, I mean, the one girl, as we read through, because she was drinking she ended up with a fine. She comes and says, I was raped. She ends up with a $500 fine, and they told her, we won't release your transcripts until you pay this.
While not reporting the rape
Right. So this is the culture, the Liberty way that they're trying to say is, how would she have avoided the $500 fine if she just didn't report it?
Right.
So it's like, we're holding your transcripts. What's the use of going to college if you can't get your transcripts?
Yeah.
I mean, it's awful. This is awful.
When you think of allegations from different people, and they said the worst, like I was just watching a documentary about the Michigan State gymnastics program, and that thing is awful. But one of the things that they kept going back is that feeling of hopelessness, like just no one's listening to you, and like it's just no one's
trying to help,
and no one's trying to help. And then so how do you make that worse? Imagine if someone was pointing the finger at you and holding you accountable for things that you did in the meantime. And that's essentially what happened here at Liberty. Like somehow it got worse, and it got worse at Liberty University. That's the politest way that I can put it.
It is bad.
Very bad.
This is heads will roll. We'll just see which ones.
In a lighter way of being bad. You said that you kind of caught the Penn State overtime debacle.
I was at my Susquehanna University homecoming, so we were watching that game, and we were following the game. I saw a little bit of it, then I saw a little bit of overtime, but I did not see. I saw first quarter and then bits and pieces.
Okay. There's, like I always say, there's 17 different ways to go into this one. Here's what I will say. I think this is like just a generic sports conversation. I think of things that the common fan just cannot handle. So when things that they like, when someone misses a point blank field goal would be an example of one of these things. Missing free throws in basketball, right? Like
layups. Free throws you get missing
free.
Layups.
How could you miss them like that? It is the not punching it in on the goal line, like not being able to get it in when you're 3 yards away has to be up there. And essentially that's what Penn State fans had to live through for almost an hour, was watching their team not being able to just punch it in from 3 yards away.
One of the things I love about sports fans is that they're crazy. And, you take a team, and I'll get back to Penn State, but you take a team like the Baltimore Ravens, who last weekend dismantled the Los Angeles Chargers, who are really good. And the Ravens were the greatest football team that ever walked on the field. Then this week, they get torn apart, and now you'll think they'll never win another game.
Sure.
What Penn State, they beat Wisconsin. They were off and rolling. They beat Auburn during their whiteout. And if Clifford doesn't get hurt, they beat Iowa, they beat Illinois, and they are going into Ohio State, and everyone is holding their breath for this whole week. No work would get done. People would just be talking about this game all week. And there's like one injury in the world of sports. It's happened to the Carolina Panthers. They can't score now that McCaffrey's hurt. Sure. The Cowboys couldn't score last year after Dak got hurt. One injury can dismantle your whole team.
Right.
And it happened to Penn State, and people are losing their minds.
The two quick analogies that come to mind to me. Mike Tyson wasn't a great boxer because he was a great boxer. Mike Tyson was a great boxer because everyone was afraid of him. And the moment he got,
for good reason.
In the moment he got hit, like the Mike Tyson thing kind of ended.
Very Ronda Rousey-ish.
Yes, very Ronda Rousey-ish. And I've talked to high school basketball coaches that they will say, like, my first 10 games of the season, I just want my kids to win. By the midpoint of the season, I want them to believe that they can beat anybody. And so I do wonder with this Penn State team, knocking off Wisconsin and beating Auburn. And then even last year, when you watched what happened when they lost that first game to Indiana.
Yes.
I just wonder with Franklin's coaching style, and I'm more positive on James Franklin than the majority of people.
I agree. I
think, but here's what I will say. James Franklin is rah-rah. James Franklin is very much a momentum coach. It is like we're up in the morning and we're up all day and we're going to do this and we're going to conquer the world and we're going to da. And I do wonder, like, when that's your mentality, like that's your coaching style, a loss seems more devastating than what it actually is. And
I'll give you that.
So I do wonder for Penn State, when you look at what happened to them last year after they lost that heartbreaker to Indiana and they just fell apart, and you look at what happened to them this year after the Clifford injury and they lose it to Iowa, and then they go into Illinois. And I don't think Clifford was completely healthy, but that's
he wasn't.
But that's not the point.
That's why I said if he doesn't get hurt, a healthy Clifford, they beat Illinois.
Yes. I just wonder now, like we're into this Franklin experience. We kind of know what a Penn State team is now under Franklin. I just wonder if that rah-rah mentality that has lifted the program up to this certain point almost just kills them when they lose a heartbreaker, because you just lose that mentality of, because now you can't conquer the world. And how do you bounce back from that? And so I am very pro Franklin, but I think anybody who wants to make that argument against him, I am all ears.
But to play devil's advocate, to finish that point, they have Ohio State this weekend. Mm-hmm. They still have Michigan and Michigan State, who are both undefeated. Now, Michigan and Michigan State play this weekend, so they won't remain undefeated. Yeah. But Michigan appears to be the best Harbaugh Michigan team they've had. Yep. Michigan State's not great, but it's still Penn State could end up 7-5. They could have 3 losses ahead of them. I agree with you. But to get back to your point, if it was only about conquering the world, then last year's 0-5 start or whatever it ended up would have been like they rallied. They circled the wagons and finished. They sprinted through the finish line.
Once the pressure was off, like once you realize you can't conquer the world now, the pressure's off. They start rallying. And so I guess what I'm saying is, like, when a Franklin team's on a roll, it is like full steam ahead, and we are going. And then when something happens, like when the wheel gets loose, his teams just have a hard time of just being like, it's just a wheel. Like it's okay. Like everything's still in front of us. And again, like that, I think you have to be a special person to be James Franklin. I said to you, I went into my first game in a decade. What he has done there with the university and the crowd and just like the whole environment, very few people could have done what he's done. And I don't even think he's necessarily a bad football coach.
I agree.
But when everything is like, we're a great team, or we're a very, very good team, we're going to be great and we can do everything and we're going to do whatever we want because we believe and we're going to work harder than anybody else. And so, like, when that's your mentality, the first time the wheel shakes and the first time everyone's looking around and going like, well, wait a second, this wasn't going to happen. It's very hard when that's your mentality to get back from it. It is.
I'm anxious to see. I'm assuming, and nobody, because they don't release what the injury is, which is bizarre to me. That is still bizarre to me. It's rib, I think, rib or collarbone or something like that. Clifford I assume will be better this week. Will feel better. Yeah. There's no way they're winning at Ohio State. And now that Ohio State is steamrolling again, and Penn State is not, and give it a couple weeks when Clifford's good as new again, in theory. Yeah. And when they get Michigan, that's the game I'm excited to see. I think they beat Michigan. I think they could, because Michigan's they got to get through this weekend, then they've got Penn State, then they've got Ohio State down the road. Things are set up for Michigan, but they have to come here. Yeah. That's the one I think. But I just feel bad for him, because this is sports. Yeah. And when your best player it happens in basketball. When your best player goes down, you can really be decimated but there are lots of places in the world where they lose their quarterback. If the Buccaneers lose Brady, they ain't winning the Super Bowl. Sure. And Penn State lost the guy they couldn't lose. Yeah. And
this is the result of it.
And it's just too bad.
The overtimes. I
didn't know the rule.
Okay, so almost everyone I spoke to didn't know the rule. And people that are like I have people that are like football coaches that did not know the rule. I hate it. It feels very penalty kickish to me. It feels very hockey.
That's a good analogy.
It feels very hockey shootout to me. And I will say this, like, it's kind of like the field goal thing. Like people used to we've gone away from it now, but people used to be like, oh, you have these Titans and they're going for 60 minutes and then a kicker decides if they win it. To me, this is like even worse than that. Like, to me, this is like you have a competitive football game for 60 minutes, tied after 2 overtimes, and instead of just like finishing it out, it's like, well, let's just throw them on the 3-yard line and get this over with.
Well,
and real quick, I would just to end it, I just would look around and being like, who would want, like, if you asked Penn State and Illinois, and you asked everyone in that stadium, and you asked everyone watching that game, and you took a vote of hands, like, who's in this? We're not into it.
I think. And I agree. And now that we've seen this, people put in new rules and they think it's a good idea, and then they sometimes see the fly in the ointment. And maybe this is the aberration. Sure. I can't believe that, what are the mathematical odds that it goes this long?
Sure.
But what was happening in some of the games, Kentucky, I think, was in one of them that went 6 or 7 overtimes, that the defenses get so exhausted that teams just end up, they just can't stop anyone.
Sure.
And that's why they put it in. I thought, on flip side, in high school, they put it on the 10.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to get to a point where you say, okay, there's no more field goals?
4 downs from the 10?
But maybe it's 3 downs from the 10?
What does high school do?
High school does 4 downs
from the 10.
See, in college, they do it from there because you're always in field goal range.
Yeah.
And then, but
this is what bothers me about the 3-yard, like the 2-point conversion of it. There's less space. And where football's not exciting? Where there's no space. Like everything football has done.
That's pretty exciting.
No, because everything football has done for the last decade is like, how do we expand the field? How do we open it up? How do we make it more exciting? That's all football has been trying to do for last. And then the NCAA comes along and says, like, at the most exciting point of the game, let's take away all the space on the field and just put them on the 3. And to me, like, it's hard. Like, it goes back to what I said about like people who get frustrated because it should be easier than it looks. I would argue scoring from the 3 is harder than scoring from the 6, harder than scoring from the 8.
Well,
because you just lose there's no space. There's none. What's his name? Orlovsky? Dan, the guy who's announcing the game.
Right.
He kept saying, he's like, Illinois and Penn State kept trying to do these quick routes and quick runs. And he's like, you almost have to roll them out because it just spaces out the field and it gives you. So, to me, that he basically knew the problem without saying the problem.
If you don't have a running quarterback, 2-point conversions are tougher.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it.
There's nowhere to operate.
I think one of the discussions that we had before like this, that it certainly cuts down on the plays. It cuts down on the injury possibility. And maybe there's a study that as people are exhausted, are more guys getting hurt in overtimes that go too long? Is it a safety issue or stuff like that? But from a coaching standpoint, I think the naysayer would say you had 60 minutes and 2 possessions to win. Sure. If you haven't won by now, this is the rules. It's the same for you and them. And even, it's still to Penn State's advantage because they got to pick, we're playing in front of the student section or not, So I don't know. It gets to that point, and it's obviously a coin flip. And the best way people still complain about the NFL overtime. People will always complain about the college overtime.
Wasn't there a belief that the NCAA had it right? Like, that's the weird part about this. Who was saying the NCAA overtime had it wrong?
I don't know.
Find me the person that was like, you know what we really need to fix? NCAA football overtime.
Well, but because
that person doesn't exist.
Well, is it from a fan standpoint or is it from an injury standpoint? Are we seeing that the attrition factor? I mean, that's why the NFL cut down their overtime 5 minutes because they're like, these guys have played an hour of NFL football and now we're giving them you've had your shot. Like, let's get out of here.
Maybe. I bet you if you ask the teams, though, they wouldn't want to.
I mean, here's the question that maybe comes back into it. Do you play 3 overtimes from the 25 and then call it a tie? They had ties in college football. They have ties in the NFL.
Yeah.
Huh? Is it like, do we need to have a win that freaking badly? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Anything else before we head out?
No, high school sports playoffs are coming. Soccer, boys and girls playoffs start this week. I know district cross country is this week, Thursday maybe. High school football has one more week.
Yeah.
But for the fall sports kids, I know tennis is already done.
Yeah.
Girls tennis is already finished. But for this is that time of year, and you step outside and you can feel it that it's that time of year. I think today it's supposed to get to the 70s, but fall has arrived. And so to all those kids that it's the bittersweet of you, like this is what you play for, but then for so many people the careers are over. So it is that time of year again, and it's special from all those aspects.
Yeah. Joe Garrison just told us rare Monday Night Football tonight because Loyal Sock's going to play Lewisburg.
Oh yeah, there is because of a COVID out.
Yes.
So Loyal Sock played Friday.
Yep.
They're playing again Monday, which is often the varsity to JV.
Yes.
It is tough to go varsity to varsity.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have another one.
I think they're going to go
Saturday.
I think they're going Friday. I don't know that for certain, but
Here's the pros and cons. If you jam it in Friday, you're playing 3 varsity football games in 8 days.
Yep.
But if you push it back to Saturday, now you're taking a week off of your playoff prep.
Yep.
Because they're going to have their first playoff game a week from Friday. So it is tough.
Yeah.
Fortunately for Loyal Sock, Lewisburg can make the playoffs too. Loyal Sock had Hughesville, who's in a down year. They have Warrior Run, who's in a down year. So they're not playing 3 juggernauts.
Sure.
But it is still the body was not designed to play 3 football games in 8 days.
Oops.
Yes, 8 days.
It will be a challenge.
So where did is that at Loyal Sock or is that at Lewisburg?
I don't know. Nope. Don't know.
I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a curiosity. If people want to get out and watch a high school football game on Monday.
On a Monday night.
It is Monday Night Football.
I'm surprised more teams don't try those types of gimmicks. Like more teams don't try to. You and I have talked about different ways to try to convince. Like we talked about Williamsport wrestling and how they have the one day where all the kids come in and watch the game during the school day or watch the match.
They have a match during the afternoon at school.
I'm surprised more high school teams don't try to do like
when I was a kid, Williamsport used to play their home games on Saturday night.
Okay.
And then people would, everyone else played on Friday.
Right.
You went to Williamsport on Saturday. I think coaches don't like the short turnaround because they're so programmed into we have 7 days.
Yeah.
And I think also depending on what Penn State's doing, because when I was a kid, college football was very rarely a primetime event. Mm-hmm. It was under the sun. Pro football, there was no Sunday night football when I was a kid, when I was a really young kid. Then they brought in Sunday night football was rare. So it was, I think Saturday night, you're like, oh, it'd be great to play on Saturday night, but if Penn State's home, we've lost all our crowd.
Sure.
And not all of it, and if Penn State is on the road, but at night, we've still lost our crowd.
Yeah.
So I know there was a school, maybe it's Mifflinburg, they used to do homecoming on Saturday. And if you were going to do one game, it would be homecoming because you actually give a chance for alumni to come home.
Sure.
Because it's hard to get here on a Friday night, depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
So, football is the one. The other sports, basketball, soccer, wrestling, baseball, that aren't used to that aren't so regimented, are used to dealing with stuff like that.
Yeah.
Football is afraid of it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all your local news.
Since I answered the how many students go to Liberty trivia question, do I win like lunch?
Sure. I'll get you some Vinny fries. There's a
You'll get me fries for lunch?
Get you fries from Vinny's.
There we go.
Small plug for Vinny's.
Nice. I get free fries.
I like their fries because they put it in the bowl.
I like them too.
And then they put the salt and then they spoon the salt like in the fries. There you go. Small plug for Vinny's. There you go.
All right.
Anything else?
That's all I got.
All right. I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina, and we will see you guys tomorrow.